Paul, you're still muted. Still muted, Paul.
Oh, there, that says
There
the,
you there you are.
okay, now then, I was attempting to share the screen and I
We
think
see it. We
you
see
do.
it. Yep.
All right. Well, if you're seeing, if we got the James Lucas before you, then that's the important thing for right now. But let me welcome everyone to this ongoing expression of exploration into the Book of Mormon, its unique perspectives, and its remarkable contribution, now approaching 200 years, having been published in this United States and widely spread abroad. This evening, it's our privilege to have James Lucas, and his topic is fundamentally working towards Zion. And I reduced the topic of his book, his 1996, I believe it is, book, Working Towards Zion, Principles of the Order of the United Order for the Modern World, with Warner Woodruff, is a book that I have rather treasured. Not that I've agreed with it or found it extraordinarily useful. In fact, I found myself in disagreement with it in a number of areas. But I understand he's put together a new edition, and so this gives us a chance to take another look at Zion. And I think we really do need to do that. Zion has gotten such a twisted set of meanings in recent years. And so, how to address, um, Lamoni was established to be a Zionic community, but that doesn't communicate really well in the modern world. And so, as I'm looking to set up the museums for experimental communities in Iowa, the utopian type communities, then I'm groping for additional verbiage with which to explain and try to help people understand the nature of what we're talking about. Well, because the LDS and the RLDS and the Strangites and the Monongahela people separated and each took a somewhat different view on the Zion approach, then working towards Zion is, I think, an altogether appropriate topic, and I'm delighted to have it before our group tonight so that we can have some discussion. James Lucas has presented numerous times previously on the forum, recently with Val Larson on parallels between Deuteronomy and First Nephi. With Jonathan Neville, he also presented on the translation process. He's a lawyer. He participates regularly and often clarifies legal issues in the forum. His popular electoral vote amendment, addressing the conflict between those supporting the Electoral College and those supporting the popular vote, merits consideration by our nation. And so I raise that point just because if in the process of discussion afterwards we don't want to get into that, I think it may actually by itself be a step towards Zion. And so that question then of that conflict in our electoral process is one of these has taken a very significant step to try to help resolve. This evening, he's addressing us on the book Working Towards Zion, and he has a new edition of it, so I'm not quite sure that the principles of the United Order for the Modern World is correct, because that's what I copied off of the 1996 edition that I have. But I do ask for you to welcome Brother Lucas back with your best listening skills and questions and the most amicable kind of relationships that are always characteristic of this forum. And I thank you so kindly for blessing me with your friendship and the blessings of a continued exercise here in which we get to explore interesting topics and chat together about things that have some kind of a Book of Mormon tie. And with that, let's offer a prayer and get him before you. Creator, originator of the word, vowels and consonants, identifying everything we conceptualize as real. We bow in appreciation that behind our perceived dimensions of reality, you generate fractals, galaxies, eternity or eternities, yet you hear us when through prayer we appeal. And this evening, as this forum meets and greets to discuss the realities and dreams we rely on, we ask that your spirit accompany and nudge us toward a better understanding of your plan for us to become people of Zion. And as Brother Lucas reflects upon his work and extrapolates elements most appropriate for our edification, we ask for him the blessing of clarity of mind and perception of needs to maximize our Zionic education. We too would ask that our participants be attuned to the deeper meanings, the more intricate gleanings available through his presentation, so we can become people of peace, agents of the Prince of Peace in our homes, communities, and nation. For we apprehend great need, souls that bleed, a world at war, leaders short of compassion. And we want to address that need, to help heal the souls that bleed, to use the breaths of life you give us to return a bit of love and blessing in our lifetime ration. And here this eve, in large part, we are here because we believe that your purposes in us fulfill a marvelous ideal. And so bless us, we pray, on this and every day, as we attempt to rearrange our lives, our thinking, to fit in your plan, your eternity, beyond our grasp, yet real. We pray in the name of the Prince of Peace. Amen. All right, James Lucas, the floor is yours. We'll begin by inviting you to determine whether you'd like to allow interruptions or if you want to present and then take all the questions and answers afterwards. I'm not hearing you.
We're not hearing you, James. It's not showing that you're muted, but we're not hearing you. Okay.
Hmm.
Still
Oh,
not yet.
while he's still trying to work out the audio, let me call the attention to the group to the fact that Dee Robinette has joined us. I need to introduce her because I had a remarkable experience on Friday last of going to my grandson's wedding practice and discovering that the girl he's marrying had her grandmother there, and that was Dee Robinette. And she and I were classmates at Graceland back in 1969. And so to see that our grandkids have gotten married and are extending our family connections in the social relationship after generations like this, rather a fascinating thing. And so she's agreed to join us tonight. And so please welcome Dee. And if you get a chance to get a question or comment in, Dee, you're welcome to. There's a react button at the bottom of the screen. If you go to that button, it gives you a chance to raise your hand. And so people who raise their hands commonly have Deb Luce mentoring to try to keep them in line so that people get a fair chance to jump in and discuss. But right now, I'm in hopes that we have the audio problems taken care of with James Lucas, so he can jump in and discuss.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. All right, very good.
Yay.
Shoot. Okay, so I'm going to put on my PowerPoint here. See if that will work.
We are not seeing anything just yet.
Yeah.
I'm showing that you're logged in multiple times, James. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I was not, my audio was not working, so I went out and went back in.
Well, lawyers are known to have some duplicitous personalities on occasion.
Okay. Bear with me a minute. I'm told here that my browser is the source of my problem here, and I don't know why that would be.
Hmm. Past experience says that James has one of the more powerful systems of the group, probably. Well, while he's digging, let me welcome Dale, Sandra, Joetta, Earl. I see Jeannie. I just lost it out, so I think he's on now. I stopped calling on people's names.
Oops.
But we're back again.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know.
I see Lori, David, John Sauer, David Job. Welcome. Okay, we got something coming up. I think maybe we're getting there, James.
Yeah, it seems
Well,
to
we're
be.
seeing the Zoom. Whoops. Where'd he go?
Earl has joined us.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. How about that? Any
Well,
luck?
no, we're still seeing the
Now
gallery.
we're back to gallery and you're no longer sharing.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So if you go back to where you had been, we were seeing the Zoom. I think that just needs to be minimized to get to your presentation.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we don't want to see
Are
me.
you, are you seeing something?
Yeah, we're seeing your Zoom screen with me in the middle, which I don't necessarily.
Okay. We're always happy
Rick,
to look at you, but
I don't know
let's see
about
if we
that. Rick
can.
Bennett, are you there?
I am. I'm muted though.
Not no more. You have any suggestions for James on how to get
Um,
his?
yeah. So if
Yeah.
he's screen sharing, he was good there, and then but he just is it a PowerPoint?
Yes.
So are you in present mode?
Oh, there's a possibility. What would I click to become a presenter?
So if you up at the top here, let me pull up my PowerPoint and then I can tell you better. Mine's opening very slowly for some reason.
Because we're waiting.
So up at the top, you should have slideshow. So file, home, insert, draw, etc. Slideshow.
See it?
And then from beginning, just below file.
Got it?
And so when you share your screen, so actually, are you full screen on your PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. So Alt tab back to Zoom and then share entire screen, and hopefully you can Alt tab to the or you can actually click on the PowerPoint slideshow. Because we saw it there when it was zooming out, and
Okay. All right. Sorry, folks.
No worries,
Hey,
we've all been there.
apology accepted. It's the first or the second time we've had a problem in the last 6 years. Uh, just about every time I've tried to do it, I've had problems, and so it's interesting how.
so that didn't work.
Um, I'm afraid that I'm stuck in my PowerPoint now. I have
So
no PowerPoint
can you Alt
controls.
tab back to Zoom?
Uh,
Or are you using a Mac?
oh, there we go.
So
Okay,
down at the
I'm
bottom,
back.
share, and then you should be the application windows there. You should be able to pick the PowerPoint slideshow.
Slideshow. Okay, is anybody seeing anything now?
No, you're not sharing.
Let
Wow.
me see if I can share mine. It gives me this. Do you see mine?
Yes, Rick started sharing the 1886 John Taylor Revelation.
Okay, so the sharing works.
Yeah, well, I shared a little bit ago on the prior.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. Apologies, folks.
Do you still have the share screen at the bottom of your screen, James? The green icon?
Share button. It's the fourth one on the bottom,
Yeah, I'm not
on
getting
the bottom of Zoom.
right. Okay.
Another option, James, would be for you to email the file to Robert or myself for purposes of see if we can get it to display.
Or me, I can share.
Or Rick.
Yeah, I'm okay. Sorry, I'm playing around here.
Robert, can we pause the recording?
Hey, we're seeing something.
Yeah, we're
That's
seeing
Earl
the
Watt's
desktop
screen.
now.
This is
I-
Earl Watt. We don't want Earl Watt sharing.
Oh,
what I can do is stop it and start another one, which would make more sense, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that would then cut out Paul's introduction. I don't know. What do you think?
Can we just pause it?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Do you see the full screen, or do you see the side
we see your
things?
desktop,
Excuse me?
your desktop or whatever, your PowerPoint. Yeah. It's not full
Oh,
screen.
okay.
You got the slides on the left, which is fine.
Okay. All right. I might just leave it at that, just so that I don't dare mess with it anymore.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I begin. So this is a presentation about this book, Working Towards Zion: Principles of the United Order for the Modern World. Warner Woodworth and I wrote this originally in 1996, and then we did a second edition. It's sold so well that we did a second edition in 1999, which is a paperback edition, and that's this cover here. We have it was. But then we kind of fell into some misadventures. The book, it sold very well, but our publisher went out of business. And for a while, we couldn't even find where our books were, but they kept being available on Amazon and other online distributors. And but eventually, they did sell out, and the book went out of print. So when I started to join the forum here, Paul was started to ask me to do a presentation on this, and I was hesitant because I was going to be talking about a book that was out of print and hard to get. However, recently we were able to recover the book and put it back into print. Now it's 1999 edition, but we did some considerable amount of updating to it. I don't know if it's enough to constitute a third edition or not, but we did do some fair amount of updating to it. And this is now the version that's available on Amazon as both a print book and also in digital format. And that's what I'll be talking about here. And anybody can go to Amazon where the book is now. As long as the Leviathan exists, the book will be available in both the print and digital format. So, for those who don't know, my co-author is Warner Woodworth. He is a professor emeritus at the business school at Brigham Young University, and is one of the leading experts in both third world economics or developing nations development, economic development, microfinance, and he has written other books and gives lectures all throughout the world as both a consultant and advisor on all sorts of cooperative and economic development functions. Here he's with his friend Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Peace Prize a few years ago and is the founder of the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, which is the largest microfinance institution in the world. And Professor Yunus was a leading figure in that area and a very good personal friend of Warner's. So that's Warner on the right and Professor Yunus on the left. So anyway, that's just so that you know who I wrote this book with. The way I put it always is that Warner practices what we preach. He's far more hands-on experience than I have, although I kind of bring my experience as a business lawyer to this book that we wrote together. So it's about applying the principles of the United Order of the modern world, or trying to build a Zion economy in the modern world. So let's take a brief look to start at the modern world, some snapshots of the modern world. Now, first of all, despite the fact that there has been a lot of progress in recent decades, nonetheless, an enormous number of people throughout the world are still poor, living below the poverty line. Over 2.5 billion people live on less than $2 a day. And this number is, as you all can know from reading the headlines, the world economy is in, sometimes a little bit dubious position. And so this progress that had been being made for some decades in increasing the general wealth of the people in the world has kind of stalled. And so these circumstances, there's still billions of people in the world who live below the poverty level or who live at just barely above the poverty level. This 2.5 billion figure is actually quite higher if you ask how many people in the world, live in very marginal circumstances. This is not just a situation that exists in the what used to be called the third world. Warner tells me we don't use that term anymore, but in any event, in developing nations, this is there's a lot of distress that carries over into modern economies. Here's a recent headline saying that the layoffs have in this last month or in January hit the highest mark since the start of 2009, which was the middle of the big last big financial crisis that we had. And these layoffs are affect particularly severe on young people who are many, and some of you may have children or grandchildren or yourselves be in position of knowing that college graduates even are having difficulty finding positions now. And this is in addition to just having trouble finding positions, and there being extensive layoffs from many in many developed countries. There's income stagnation. If you take out inflation, incomes have stagnated for the last 30 years. And this is illustrated by this graph. The upper line shows the increase in productivity, and the lower line shows the level of incomes adjusted for inflation. And this is in developed nations. So you can see that about 1980, these two lines used to be kind of in parallel in earlier decades when productivity went up. Incomes generally kind of tracked up with them. So as workers became more productive, their real incomes also tended to increase. But that relationship ended in around 1980 and has continued to become worse and worse. So that now a person who is going out to work today in again inflation adjusted terms is making much less money than those of us who began our working lives in maybe the 1960s or 1970s. And indeed, and beyond sort of the basic economic situation, we have many other challenges. We have obviously you have climate change. You have this previous illustration. The mathematical result of this is that inequality has vastly expanded. As you might put it, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and the middle class is falling behind. So we have a situation where there's a wide variety. And then on top of it all, it used to be that when we had times of economic distress, governments could bail us out by engaging in deficit spending. But almost all governments, including that in the United States, are now far more indebted than they were in the past and don't have the ability to just spend money to pull us out of recessions, such as what occurred in the recession of 2007. So in addition to that, private debt, many individuals live on because of the relatively lower incomes that are as a result of this chart here are increasingly indebted. Excuse me. So this leads to a situation excuse me, where particularly young people overall are increasingly pessimistic about the future. And here's, I won't go through the 13 reasons here, but here's a recent headline, again, just from January, about why young people are becoming increasingly pessimistic about the future. And this is young people in developed nations. This is not, again, talking about less developed nations. Even in developed nations, the younger generations are very, very pessimistic about the future. And this has a very immediate consequence in that, a social consequence in that marriage and birth rates have collapsed. And across most of the world, except in really poor countries, which don't need a lot more babies, but have them, but basically everywhere else in the world, including middle income countries, not just in wealthy countries, the birth rate is below replacement level, which means that the populations are aging, which means that there will be fewer taxpayers and consumers to support retired people in the future. And quite frankly, this is going to result in a collapse in the population. So it's not something that's going to happen next year, but in the next couple of decades, the world's population will begin to decline, and you might think, oh well, we could use less people. There's too many people in the world, but unfortunately, this also comes with aging populations, a serious decline in the number of workers, consumers, and taxpayers, and so this will put stress on our heavily indebted governments, and basically could result in the end of the economic system that has prevailed for most of the 20th century and 21st century, which all of us on this call benefited from, even if we didn't consider ourselves wealthy. Nonetheless, we have been living in the wealthiest time in history, but that looks like it's going to end. So that's just a little survey of what the world is that we are talking about here when we talk about trying to build a Zion economy in the modern world. So Joseph Smith, this is a rather famous quote from him, who described that when man is filled with the love of God, he's not content to bless his family alone, but ranges through the whole world, anxious to bless the whole human race. So this is very much the perspective of the restored gospel, and for that matter, the entire Christian gospel, is that we're supposed to have some way to want to help everyone in the world to improve their circumstances. This was summarized by Joseph F. Smith, who was the son of, we had a presentation about Hiram Smith just a few weeks ago. So Joseph F. Smith was the son of Hiram and Mary Fielding. So he was Joseph Fielding Smith. And he was a prominent, he was the president of the LDS Church from 1900 to 1916, where he was actually in parallel with his cousin, Joseph Smith III, for much of that period of time. And this is his summation of it. It was the doctrine of Joseph Smith that a religion which has not the power to save people temporally and make them prosperous and happy here cannot be depended upon to save them spiritually, to exalt them in the life to come. So this is very much a piece of our restored gospel, and that we are not just responsible for the spiritual welfare of our fellow people, but also their temporal welfare. Now, this is reflected, has been reflected in the history of Christianity for a long time. Christians since the beginning have been familiar with the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament, which describes after the resurrection, when the apostles took over the church. At least at the beginning, they had a kind of a communal organization where they held, it says, all things in common. This is in Acts 4:32, something which Christians have been very keenly aware of this, I think, scripture for a very long time. And Then, of course, since this is a Book of Mormon forum, we have to have look at the Book of Mormon, and that, of course, describes how after Christ's visits to the people in the Americas, they also did try to establish a kind of Christian communalism where they had all things in common among them, every man dealing justly one with another, and they did all things even as Jesus had commanded them. And I got the both version citations there to this passage. And again, to just to hark back to another recent presentation, our friend Thomas Murphy was arguing that this passage of the Book of Mormon was inspired by the great Iroquois nation's peace. And I pointed out to him that, and I'm not saying he's wrong, you can have more than one source for something. But if you're looking for a naturalistic explanation of this verse in 3rd Nephi, I would point, it would seem more obvious to me to point to the book of Acts, where you can see I've highlighted it here, that actually even use the very same phraseology. The Book of Mormon picks up the same phraseology that appears in the King James Version of the New Testament. And of course, we also have, even before the time of Christ, we have in Joseph Smith's inspired version of the Bible, the story of Enoch, which is completely not found in the Old Testament, where we have this description of the people Zion, who were of one heart and one mind and dwelt in righteousness, and there was no poor among them. And this is something which, again, both our traditions, the LDS have it in our Pearl of Great Price in the Book of Moses. And of course, in the Community of Christ, you have the inspired version, and this is Genesis 7:23 in the inspired version. So you have this tradition clearly where the Lord has, in fact, commanded us to try to minister to each other. And we have this concept that somehow Christians should be sharing so that there are no poor people amongst them. So when the Restoration began, and we have in the very early days of the restored church, in our common history, of course, we had the introduction of the concepts of consecration and stewardship. And so this was a concerted effort. It was begun in Missouri it was attempted to be begun in Missouri, and also it was attempted to be begun in Kirtland. And so in Section 42 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which is Section 42 in both the LDS and the Community of Christ Pearl of Great Price, Doctrine and Covenants, they started to set up a system. And this system sometimes has, it's called the United Order. That's what we're referring to in the title of the book. And it contemplated everyone donating into a common fund, basically. And then I've highlighted here, every man should be made accountable as a steward over his own property or what he's received. So there was a concept apparently that there would be a contribution, everybody kind of would pool their resources, and then everyone would receive a stewardship out of those to support, and as it says here, what is sufficient for himself and his family. I apologize, this is the versification in the LDS Doctrine and Covenants. I imagine that there probably is different versification, but it still is Section 42, also in the Community of Christ Doctrine and Covenants. And then then in verse 33, it contemplates that the residue or surplus would be made available to the various groups or the 34, that there would be a storehouse, and that the excess or residue beyond what one needed for oneself and one's family would be put into this storehouse to administer to the poor and the needy. which is, again, the primary goal. Now, this system broke down in both Ohio and Missouri. Basically, it's hard to set up an ideal community when people are burning down your house and chasing you out of their land. But nonetheless, there were a lot of revelations that set out the outline of how this system would work. So in section 51, and this is the section number in both the LDS and Community of Christ Doctrine and Covenants, there's a description of how the bishop, Edward Partridge, was the first bishop of the church, was to make this allocation and appoint to people their portions, and these were to be adjusted to needs, every man equal according to his family, according to his circumstances, his wants and needs. And then, but what's interesting here is that the law entered into it. So in verse 4 here, first of all, they were very careful to be sure that the property that was donated to the church for this redistribution was in fact deeded to the church so that somebody couldn't come and claim it back, which is always an issue with any kind of joint venture of any sort. I mean, just a regular business company has to, if you put money into the company and buy stock in the company, you have to have very clear rules about whether you could ask for your stock back or not. I mean, that's just regular commercial business law. And then they had this idea that if a person transgressed, that they could be expelled from the organization. But he would, when somebody received a stewardship from the common fund, that stewardship would be the private property of the member, and that if he then left or was expelled, he could take that part of the stewardship that had been deeded to him. So this shows that the concept of private property was retained in this communal organization. And thus, verse 6 says, and thus all things shall be made sure according to the laws of the land. So they were careful to make sure that private property was preserved and that legal formalities were followed. And then the final element of this was the idea of a treasury. Sometimes it's called a storehouse, but then it's a treasury. And this is where you would put your excess. So it says that if you have you run your, now again, this is done in the context of an agricultural economy. So mostly thinking in terms of private farms, small farms, and perhaps individual mom and pop type businesses. So you would deposit your excess in this treasury, and then if you would need money to operate your stewardship and so forth, that would come out of the treasury by the voice and consent of the order, here in verse 71. And so you had this pooling of resources, but resources that would be available to participants to operate their little farm or their little business that they had received as their stewardship. And this is in section 104 in the LDS Doctrine and Covenants. It's section 101 in the Community of Christ Doctrine and Covenants. So again, the experience in Missouri and Ohio was not successful. When they went to Nauvoo, they did not try to restart the entire United Order type of thing. It operated on a simpler kind of a basis. There would be the poor would be cared for by bishops, and Nauvoo being a city in Illinois, the city was divided into wards, and the tradition of calling the local congregations led by a bishop a ward was at least carried over by the LDS when they went to Utah. and we use that term for our congregations to this day. But that's the origin of it. But originally, it wasn't a place where it wasn't a congregation. It was a district of the city that was under the supervision of a bishop who was charged with taking care of the poor and needy in that area. So then Joseph and Hiram were killed. The church kind of broke up. A large group went to Utah. Others were sort of scattered about the Midwest and eventually reorganized themselves. So I'm sure everybody on this call is familiar with that history. So the group. So I'm now going to focus on the history of these concepts in the Utah church. However, I do acknowledge that these scriptures and these commandments and these concepts have remained also very strong in the community of Christ. And for example, that I know that under Frederick Madison Smith was very interested in these concepts and engaged in a lot of efforts that were referred to as Zionic. But this, we're going down the Utah track here, but I would be very interested in perhaps in the discussion afterwards to hear what knowledge you all have about the history of the effort to apply these concepts in the community of Christ. So those saints who went to Utah, at first just getting pioneering in the middle of a desert, as Rick said, Utah is a desert, and so that sort of was the focus of efforts through the 1850s and 1860s. However, by the time of the later 1860s and particularly the 1870s, Brigham Young decided that we needed to reestablish the United Order. These scriptures were still very strong in our tradition. They were in our scriptures, and he felt we needed to do it. However, he was presented with a problem, which is that by that time, the 1870s, the United States was undergoing the Industrial Revolution. So it was not the agrarian economy of the Missouri and Ohio and even Illinois experience where everybody was basically an individual entrepreneur. Either you had your small farm or maybe you had a little shop, but that was about as sophisticated as the economy got. But by the 1870s, the world, the United States at least, and of course in Great Britain, was starting into the Industrial Revolution in a big way. And this presented a very different kind of an economy than the one that existed in the 1840s and 1830s and when the original Zion United Order revelations were given. And the leaders of the church were fully familiar with this because the apostles had all gone on missions to Great Britain in the 1840s. And this was when Great Britain was very much in the middle of the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. And so people like these rural Connecticut or, New England Yankees, people like Brigham Young and Heber Kimball and Orson and Parley Pratt and so forth, all these these Americans were confronted by the realities of the Industrial Revolution when they went to preach the gospel in Britain. So, for example, here's Brigham Young's reactions to what he saw in Britain when he went there as a mission. He says, I've seen many cases of this kind in Europe where a young lady would have to take her clothing on a Saturday night and wash it because she didn't have a change of clothes. So she might go to a meeting on the Sunday. Who is she laboring for, he asks. For those who, many of them, are living in luxury, and to serve classes that are living on them, the poor laboring men and women are toiling, working their lives out to earn that which will keep a little life in them. Is this equality? No, he says. What is to be done? The Latter-day Saints will never accomplish their mission until this inequality shall cease upon the earth. Now that's Brigham Young. And this is the personal experience and perspective that he brought to the effort to implement United Order in Utah in the 1870s in the midst of a rapidly industrializing economy. So, and they recognized this. So, example, Apostle Orson Pratt, who had also been a missionary in England and had seen the Industrial Revolution firsthand, said, "I do not know that the common stock operation which God commanded us to enter into Jackson County will be suitable in the year 1874. By John Stock, he's referring to the sort of communal storehouse operation that is described in the Revelations. Instead, he said, every man got his stewardship and he occupied it. Here we have to labor under other circumstances. In other words, instead of everybody just having their own individual stewardship, a little farm, a little shop, it requires more joint effort to do things like mine or manufacture. He says it may require the experience of a vast amount of labor in order to develop the resources of these mountains. And in this case, cooperation will be absolutely necessary. So in other words, they're now recognizing that they're in a situation where you can't just have individual stewardships like in Missouri and Ohio and Illinois, that some enterprises are going to require that people work in multi-employee types of situations. Now, the efforts to implement the United Order during the 1870s and 1880s, 1860s did reflect this. They were extremely flexible. Now, amongst Utah LDS, there's a strong memory of a town called Orderville, which is in southern Utah, which was very much a communal joint farming community, which basically resembled an Israeli kibbutz. And in fact, it was started about the same time that the first kibbutzim were started in Israel. So that is sort of in the popular imagination of people from the LDS Church. Orderville is kind of seen as the example of this United Order effort in the late 1800s. However, that's not true. I mean, Orderville existed, and it was very much bore astonishing resemblance to the kibbutz that were being started in Palestine at that time. But actually, the far more people who were involved in this effort were in larger enterprises. For example, again, some of you may be familiar, in Utah, there was a department store called ZCMI. ZCMI stands for Zion Cooperative Mercantile Institution. And that was it's the nation's first department store. This is where the concept of the department store was initiated. And what this was an effort to get all of the merchants of Salt Lake to combine their operations so that they could have greater purchasing power and coordination under the principles of the United Order. So this was invented. The first department store was invented as a United Order effort. They also established factories. There was a very large woolen mill established in Provo, the Provo Woolen Mills. And this, of course, was not a one-man operation. This was had quite a few people working in it. And, to run a big operation like this, which rivaled the size of textile plants that the apostles had seen in Britain, required many people to be involved with it, and it had to be organized as a cooperative corporation to function efficiently. And again, they addressed these issues. So people who were working in the Provo Woolen Mill pulled out their Doctrine and Covenants and said, well, it says here that we're supposed to be run by the common consent of the United Order. So here I am working in this woolen factory. I appreciate the job. It pays nice, but aren't we supposed to have the common consent in running this thing? So John Taylor, who was an Englishman, and one of the apostles, and of course his greatest claim to fame was, of course, he was in Liberty jail with Joseph and Hiram, and when they were killed, John Taylor was severely wounded, and then later he, of course, was Brigham Young's successor as the leader of the LDS Church. So he addressed these issues to these employees at the Provo woolen mills who were saying, the Doctrine and Covenant talks about this being run by the by the consent of the order, by common consent. And John Taylor then explained that, in a world where you have to have multi-employee businesses, the way the workers control them is that they elect the management and they control the management. So because the Provo woolen mills were organized as a cooperative, all the employees were the ones who elected the management. So he said, this is how you can control. And in this, you're not any different than any other of the operations of the Industrial Revolution, telegraph, mercantile, manufacturing, and cooperative associations. And the people who own the stock are the ones who, and elect and control the leadership, are the people who are exercising common consent, if you will. And so you're basically, because the Provo woolen mills are organized as an employee-owned cooperative, you're basically in the same position as merchants, capitalists, and so forth, who are in the same situation you are when they become stockholders of industrial corporations. And so you have the same kind of free agency as worker owners of this cooperative factory as J.P. Morgan or John D. Rockefeller do for their companies. Then finally, another element of the Industrial Revolution, of course, was the rise of finance. And so here's what John Taylor had to say about financing. Talk about financiering. Financier for the poor, for the working man, requires labor and is willing to do it and act in the interest of the community for the welfare of Zion and the building up of the kingdom of God. This is our calling. It is not to build yourselves up, but to build up the church and kingdom of God. Do not let us have anybody crying for bread or suffering for want of employment. Let us furnish employment for all. So the objective was, although it was organized as corporations in corporate form, because that was just what the modern industrial economy required, the objective still wasn't to create, millionaires or billionaires. The objective was to provide employment so that the people would not be poor, so that people would have a means to support themselves. So that was the objective. So this experiment went through the 1880s, and then it failed. I mean, it did not continue. We do not have United Order cooperatives in Utah today, and there are a number of reasons for this. One is that the LDS Church essentially had, due to the anti-polygamy persecution, had to surrender to the federal government and basically give up a lot of the unique aspects of the restored gospel. The LDS Church was disincorporated in 1887 by Act of Congress. And so lacking any kind of central institution to organize and finance these co-ops. And at the time, there were a couple hundred of these co-ops in Utah and the other pioneer areas of the West. But they all, they know with that, when the LDS Church was disincorporated and they didn't have a source of financing or organization, and the entire sort of Utah Mormon or Western Mormon community went into considerable state of financial distress. Didn't help that there was a national depression in 1893. But also there was a big push after the decision was made to give up plural marriage. There was a big push to Americanize, for the Western Mormons or Latter-day Saints to Americanize themselves. And they were Americanizing themselves in the midst of a hyper-capitalist era. This is the era of the robber barons in the United States. So when you became an American, you bought into a hyper-capitalist era of that time. There are those who say that the saints were simply not, they're too selfish. And that could be a factor too. This is, it's tough to share your goods with others, even though there was a lot of protections and it was in the form of cooperative corporations. Another problem they had was lack of models. Nobody had tried to implement a communal cooperative organization on this scale, and the scale of an entire economy. And so, they kind of they tried lots of different things. They're extremely flexible and creative, but they didn't really have anything to look to show how you could make this work in the context of an industrialized economy. And finally, they never did, even though there were the revelations called for there to be a treasury, they never were able to establish a real functioning financing organization. They talked about, we need to have men of business, put their money into developing these co-ops, but there was never any regular system. They never set up a bank to service all of these cooperatives or to provide a method to really fund the cooperative endeavors. Kind of the LDS Church kind of filled that function, but then when it was disincorporated in 1887, that all just kind of fell apart. And by the late 1890s, the LDS Church was in severe financial distress, and certainly in no position to engage in bold cooperative economic experiments. However, the scriptures stayed in the Doctrine and Covenants, and certainly there was a strong memory of this United Order effort that was retained by the members of the LDS Church. So in the 1930s, when the Great Depression hit the United States, the LDS Church started a welfare program that distributed food and helped people with housing and helped with job placement, a program which has become quite large and continues to this day. There were other efforts that the church in the 1980s, when there was a significant starvation in Africa due to the Biafran civil war in Nigeria, there was a fast held in the LDS Church to raise some money for the, and it raised way more money than the LDS Church leadership was anticipating. So all this money that went way beyond what they could donate to the particular situation in Africa, they established a humanitarian services operation, and then later went over, created an LDS Charities organization. And now this is where my co-author, Warner Woodworth, who was a professor at the Brigham Young University Business School, was a major consultant on all of these efforts and was very integral behind the scenes in helping develop all of these activities. So the LDS Church got into the humanitarian business in a big way. And as of last year, they were giving over $1 billion a year annually into various sorts of charitable and humanitarian efforts. In 2001, they launched what's called the Perpetual Education Fund, which was basically they would make loans to poor young Latter-day Saints in developing countries to get educations and become so they could improve their situations. This was modeled after the concept of a fund that existed to help, called the Perpetual Emigration Fund, which helped people go across the plains to Utah in the earlier times. And that fund was actually based on the principles of microcredit, where you make small loans to poor people, and because they have no collateral, what they do is they cross guarantee their you have a little group and you'll cross guarantee their funds. this is how the Grameen Bank that I mentioned earlier, that was in Bangladesh, was founded by Muhammad Yunus, functioned, and then that has become a major way of providing humanitarian funding aid to the vast number of poor people around the world who function in the informal economy. And again, my co-author Warner Woodworth was behind the scenes was a major architect of this program. That has then evolved in more recent years into what's called self-reliance services, where the LDS Church has 122 countries operations where it just does different things to try to help people develop situations for themselves. And probably the most recent high-profile effort is that Brigham Young University's Idaho campus has launched an online university worldwide, which now has more than 100,000 plus participants, and which provides people in developing countries with an American university degree, which is very prestigious, much more prestigious than degrees that they might get from their local institutions of higher learning. But beyond, these efforts by the institutional LDS Church, individual Latter-day Saints have, misspelled initiatives, have engaged in numerous private efforts. And this is just a short list. A group of LDS people connected with a little town or a region of the country of Mali called Olusegun to provide a sort of a comprehensive set of efforts to help them. This organization called Choice Humanitarian operates in 7 different nations. This was, again, an international effort by individual Latter-day Saints. This group, More Mentors International, again, was founded by my co-author, Warner Woodworth. It started in the Philippines and has spread to Central America. This focuses on, again, going back to the informal sector, where many people in developing nations work, and providing them with business advice and microcredit funding to help people develop their little informal sector businesses. You know, the little lady who sells food on the piazza, or the sewing and so forth. Another organization like this is HELP. Warner established a group called Unitas International with some people who had made a bunch of money with Microsoft that tries to provide more institutional help. Then there are individual efforts for tragedies, like when there was earthquakes and hurricanes in Haiti. A group was started. And so anyway, the bottom line is that there are now more than 250 NGOs, that's non-governmental organizations, that have been started by Latter-day Saints to try to do in many different ways in many different parts of the world, try to help people. So, and we talk about all this in detail in my book, our book, because my co-author Warner serves as a consultant and advisor to many of these groups. However, what I'd like to, and I started late. I hope you don't mind if I take another 10 minutes here, because this is really the sort of the punchline, if you will, of my presentation. So these are all scattered groups, and they do good things and try to do good things. But the question becomes, how can you organize, or is it possible or conceivable that we could organize an entire economy on Zion principles, like what we discovered? And so therefore, I'll just finish here by introducing you all to Mondragon. Mondragon is a town in the northwest of Spain. It's in the Basque country. It's very much a Basque town. And in the 1950s, while Spain was still under fascist control, there was a young priest by the name of Jose Maria Arizmendieta. It took me a long time to learn how to pronounce that name, who was assigned to be the parish priest in Mondragon. And what he did was, and it was a very poor town, the Basque country was very anti-Franco, So it had subject to a lot of repression by the fascist government. So it was very poor. And he's called Don Jose Maria, is how he's referred to. Was a student of Catholic social teaching, the social gospel teaching, things like the Rerum Novarum, which is the papal epistle from 1891 by Pope Leo XIII, who's advocated that Catholics should be involved in trying to help poor people, and laid out how capital and labor should work together. And of course, our current Pope takes his name from Pope Leo XIII, because he's the current Pope is such an admirer of this teaching. So Don Jose Maria was very much involved with this. So he came to his parish, and in addition to just conducting masses and doing other priest stuff, he urged them to start building a cooperative businesses. And at first they kind of thought, well, okay, I mean, this priest, he was Basque himself, so he could relate to the people, he could speak the language, and so they accepted him, but they thought he was a little crazy when he kept telling them, well, you need to start your own business, you need to start your own co-op that you own, and we need to develop your area here and get you folks higher incomes and more self-sufficiency and so forth. So long story short, the what they established in 1956 with just a few dozen workers starting a little factory to make portable heaters is now a major corporation called the Mondragon Corporation, which has vast factories, and just some statistics, has over 70,000 employee owners that they sell into over 150 countries. They have over $11 billion, 11 million billion euros in annual revenues. They're very profitable. The EBITDA is over 1.6 billion euros. But under the guidance, now Don Jose Maria died, a long time ago, but under the principles that he set up and that he trained with them, they have done things. Like, for example, they have a rule that the top earners can't make more than 10 times what the factory workers do. They may think 10 to 1. Wow, that's still a pretty big ratio. But when you consider that in modern corporations, like in the United States, that ratio is hundreds to 1. The CEO of a Fortune 500 company can easily have a salary that's 200 or 300 times that of the a person on the factory floor. This is really quite amazing. They've been very successful. So it's been in existence since the 1950s. They've gone through recessions and so forth. So they have a system where they lay off if one of the businesses gets into some trouble or there's a depression. They will try to place workers that have to be laid off in other co-op companies, so that you don't just have massive layoffs as the first reaction when times are hard. So they've been very successful at this, and probably the most important things is that they started a bank. It was originally called the Caja Laboral Popular. It's now called the Laboral Cuchta, which is a Basque word. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but it's a major bank and has over 1.3 million customers, 2,500 employee owners, over 400 offices. But the most important thing about this bank is that it not only is a bank, or you have accounts there and they'll give you credit cards and loans to buy a house and all that usual bank stuff, but they also have a branch that provides funding and advisory services to start new co-ops. So that's how this thing has grown from originally about 50 employees to over 70,000 employee owners, because this bank of theirs has funded new startups and expansions and so forth. This is a little chart of how it's organized. You can see I got all kinds of committees. the General Assembly. But the key thing is, if you look on the right, the General Assembly, that's all of the workers who vote, and then they select the board of directors, and the board of directors selects the management. You see on the left side. So even though these are big corporations with tens of thousands of employees and billions of euros in sales, they are still operated in a way that where the ultimate control rests with the workers. So that's the Mondragon system. Now, the Mondragon, this is not, Warner and I weren't the first people to discover this. Mondragon is famous. Anybody who's involved with cooperatives or anybody who's a Christian Democrat or a social democrat in Europe especially, but also in the United States, knows about Mondragon. It's widely regarded, it's widely respected, but the problem is, and everybody said, "Oh wow, we should duplicate Mondragon. This is great. A way of providing employment and but that's owned by the workers." But it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened, and sociologists and economists all across Europe and across the world are always asking themselves, why? Because there's been other efforts to start co-ops like this, but they don't seem to work, or they are not. Maybe they work, but they simply don't grow the way Mondragon has grown. And so our argument in the book is that the reason Mondragon works is because it has rediscovered, or Don Jose Maria, this Catholic priest, Basque Catholic priest, rediscovered the principles of the United Order. So just to run through them, care for the poor. Now, this is not a charitable institution. You have to show up and punch the clock if you're going to have a job there, but it provides employment for the poor people. And as we saw from the earlier quotes, this was the concept of the United Orders. It wasn't, there's a scripture which is in the Doctrine and Covenants which says, everybody needs to work, no free rides, so to speak. It's not a welfare system. This is the idea is that people work and they have dignity and they have, they're producing something. So they have self-dignity as well as an income to support their families and so forth. The principle of consecration, you actually, when you are hired by Mondragon, you actually have to buy in to the cooperative. Now, the bank will loan you some money, and it's not a high fee that you have to put in, but you do have to put in a contribution to get a job at one of the Mondragon enterprises. This concept of stewardship. So a little chart that I just showed you shows that this is how the employee owners are the ones who are in charge and responsible for the success of the business. And this includes making difficult decisions. They will vote not to take raises so that there'll be money to expand the business. And they take very responsible decisions. And most controversially, in the world of particularly leftist politics in Europe, they bar unions. Trade unions are prohibited in Mondragon enterprises on the theory that when the workers are the bosses, why do you need a trade union for? And if you try to start a trade union, they'll fire you. So this is the workers are responsible and in control. Finally, they have a storehouse and treasury, so they have this bank, this very big successful bank, so they can pool their resources, which was something that the United Orders of the Latter-day Saints, both in Missouri and Ohio and in Utah, didn't have. And the final factor is moral motivations. Basically, to participate in a Zion community, you can't be motivated simply by material motives. Particularly in Mondragon, because of this cap on the salaries. So the factory workers in Mondragon they are paid at current, at competitive rates. In other words, you don't make more or less money, or you don't work, less money working for a Mondragon factory. You get paid the same thing that a guy down in Madrid or in Barcelona is paid for doing a similar type of a job. And then there are, distributions and benefits on top of that, profit sharing and stuff like that. But the base salaries are competitive. But that means that with this 10-to-1 cap, that top managers and professionals do not make as much money as management in private companies. Because you an American Fortune 500 company where the CEO makes 200 times what the factory workers makes, he is not going to make that kind of money. He's going to make a very nice salary, but he's not going to make that kind of money working for Mondragon. So particularly for management and professional level employees, you have to make a sacrifice to work for Mondragon because you're not going to be making the same kind of money that you can make in a private enterprise. So we argue that these are factors that of course, Mondragon doesn't conceptualize them that way, but we feel that these are the factors that have made Mondragon successful because they have incorporated these principles and this ideology that they developed under Don Jose Maria. And that's why they have succeeded, whereas others who've tried to duplicate the format of Mondragon have not. So our argument in the book is that those who follow the restored gospels principles of consecration and stewardship have the ability to create other Mondragons, and that would be the foundation for a Zion economy. If we, the Latter-day Saints, who have inculcated and accept as a religious principle these concepts laid out in the Doctrine and Covenant revelations from the beginning of our restoration, that we could implement an economy that operated like a Mondragon, so that you would have hundreds of Mondragons and thus create what would effectively be a Zion economy. And that's the argument that we make in the book. So I will end. So anyway, that's my presentation. I'm sorry I ran over. I don't think I went over an hour, but I certainly, because I screwed up my power sharing, you've all been very patient to stay with me for this long. And I will now see if I can, let's see, go back here and my share screen. And
okay, I think we have the gallery open now, James.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. Let me thank you. I had written down a question for you before the presentation because I read about Mondragon in the 1996 book, and clearly I was anxious to get an update. So you've done that. So thank you for answering that question before I even got to ask it. I'm very pleased to have people have the chance to talk about Zionic exercises, and I'm sure we have several people that have experience that can be shared. I will be contacting Katie Lockyer of Outreach International to see if we can get a presentation from that vantage point, because Outreach International was a Zionic effort set up by the Community of Christ, actually the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ, back in the early 70s, and it is serving more than 40 countries with the PhD program. It's a participatory development so that people in villages or groups of people that are anxious to improve their situation can put together a plan, usually with a bit of help from somebody that can inspire the gathering of the leaders of the community. But they put together a plan. Outreach becomes a partner and works with them for a few years to try to help that plan be implemented. My wife and I have participated in these projects since 1978 and have been just delighted that our little contributions can be so magnified by such a profound stratagem. And so I would cite that as one. You ask about uh, Zionic projects in the community of Christ. That's one that is currently one of our best examples, I think. But I will
Okay.
yield. Yeah, I certainly wanted to thank you, and let me just yield as well to the questions and comments to give people a chance to jump in here and talk about the Zionic prospects, because what an exciting prospect it is that we can actually improve our economies this way. My second option, I wanted to highlight that back in the 30s, Charles Hyde and David Friedenberg established an organization that became Hy-Vee food stores. And David Friedenberg's son, Dwight Friedenberg, became the CEO after they started during the Depression and were able to work their way through it and fed lots of people in the small communities of southern Iowa and northern Missouri. Lamoni was where Charles Hyde had his food store, and so I knew Charles and Mabel. She was a teacher at Graceland, and one of my classmates, Stuart Main, hired on with Charles Hyde in 1964 and had a marvelous career working for Hy-Vee throughout his whole lifetime. He's retired but now deceased, but nonetheless he got an excellent retirement. And as I look back upon what Hyde and Friedenberg set up, they made it so it was an employee-owned company, and it is now the largest employer in the state of Iowa.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, let's let other people get their comments in. I see Val.
Okay,
Good.
yep, Val, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think James, two different comments. One is I think that as a ward essentially functions not in the same way, but has similar kinds of outcomes. One of the ways in which you could measure the effect, a Zion effect, is with something called a Gini coefficient. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but a Gini coefficient measures income dispersion in a community. So if the Gini coefficient is 0, income is equal across the community. If it's 1, then one person has all the income.
Right.
Among the states in the United States, Utah has consistently had the lowest Gini coefficient. And when people have looked at this, the reason for it is essentially the way wards work. And wards, of course, we still have residual commitment to this kind of Zionic idea. And the reason Utah's Gini coefficient is low isn't because people aren't making money at the top, although if you are good at executive stuff, you get called to be a bishop or a stake president, and you end up devoting a lot of time, not just to your business, but to supporting the community. But the main thing is it raises the people at the bottom up. And the reason is that a ward functions as a kind of, if you have a single parent home, the men in that ward tend to step in if there's a missing father, and they become fathers to the children. There's examples in the ward, like if the other kids are going to college, then people coming from lower socioeconomic strata are influenced by that. So wards actually, without this kind of organization, tend to have that effect. I don't know if the same thing is true in the Community of Christ congregations. It may well be, but certainly Utah has pretty well, it gives us good empirical data that this Zionic thing continues to function. That was just an observation. As a comment, I took a class, I sat in on a class on Marxism years ago, and it talked about the principle of exploitation, which was one person produces the wealth and somebody else collects it. And that's kind of what Brigham Young was talking about when he was describing what was going on in England. around the same time that Marx was writing, actually. So he and Marx were observing the same thing. But at the time, I read an article in the New Republic by Robert Reich, who was labor secretary under Clinton, and he's a leftist economist at the University of Berkeley, California. And he was talking about how with globalization, what was happening was that the high-skilled people, the people with executive skills, entrepreneurial skills, and so forth, were starting to spread their skills throughout the world, but the labor was competing against the world. As we globalized, workers had to compete against people in China. But if you were an inventor, an entrepreneur, you could sell your skills worldwide. And that this was reducing, I think some of the effects you saw there in the 1980 when you started seeing a change where productivity was still going up, but the salaries were not. One of the reasons for that was we've got a globalized labor market. And what came out of that was the workers at a place like GM were actually exploiting the engineers and the executives in some sense. Their salaries, the salary differentials had not been as great before globalization as they were after, because there was a kind of capture, a domestic capture of those skills. And as it became globalized, there was actually the level of contribution of the inventors and the entrepreneurs and the financiers and all that was actually greater than the laborers was. And when it became a global market, that exploitation ended. And that's where you saw some of that divergence, productivity. And to cap this off with Mondragon, the problem with the 1 to 10 ratio on salaries, if people are willing to go along with it, there's no problem with that, actually. But what evidence shows is the people that are earning the 10 are the executives and others. If they're good, they're making much more than 10 times the contribution to the organization. Like an inventor who invents something is making a huge contribution. The entrepreneur is making huge contributions to the success of the organization. And in a market economy, the payoffs tend to come to those contributions. So there's a kind of artificial. So the problem would be if they're doing the decision making on a one person, one vote basis, you might actually get bad. You're not actually capitalizing on your executive talent and visionary people that make for hugely successful organizations. I know that's a long comment, but I wonder if that might not be an important flaw. Someone like Elon Musk is a visionary that contributes hugely to his organizations, and if he's willing to take a 10x salary, that's fine. But if he only gets if he doesn't get also outsized executive ability to make the organization can't really flourish.
Well, two quick responses to that. First of all, most CEOs are not Elon Musk's. So one can argue that well, basically that most CEOs are basically just paper pushers that are politically adept at rising through the bureaucratic ranks in a corporation, and don't really bring that much to justify their 200 times salary over the factory workers. And secondly, you can, well, in Mondragon, you have they will make exceptions. So, like, for example, they started a healthcare operation, and to get doctors, you had to pay extra money. And the workers voted to agree to that, when they, for their medical care operation or healthcare business, that they would allow doctors to make more than outside of the 10 times gap. So they have the power to make exceptions, and if somebody is justified, they can do that. I mean, if you were to really globalize the Mondragon model, you might well want to make some variations to account for inventors. One way you could do that would be to have a patent pool and allow the inventors to draw the effective equivalent of royalties out of the patent pool. Maybe they wouldn't make $1 billion, but they might very well do much better than the 10-to-1 ratio would permit. So it's a legitimate question that you're raising, but there are ways that it could be done, and I think that the experience with the Mondragon physicians shows that the employee owners will agree to exceptions where they can be shown that there is really a value add of from the person who's asking to receive a larger flow of the revenue. And I think you'd find that to be the case for inventor. I mean, if some guy came and had made an invention and the workers saw, wow, we are really going to make a lot more money with this guy's invention, and the inventor guy said, yeah, I'd like to have a little, I'd have some royalty type of income or from this invention, which may equal a lot more than I would make even at the 10-time thing. I think that it's the Mondragon workers have shown that they would be open to agreeing to those kinds of exceptions. So,
well, one other exception that might be relevant is in the old Soviet Union, where they didn't have any capitalists, they were actually value subtractors on a lot of the inputs that they put in. In other words, they built a tractor, but the tractor had less value than the steel and the other inputs that went into it, because there was no one sort of monitoring the use of capital to make it efficient. So capitalists actually, the finance people, if they're good at their jobs, they direct money to its most productive use. That's actually a really valuable function within a company too, as along with inventing. And if there aren't rewards to that, what you end up potentially getting is value subtraction.
Yeah, and well, that's why it's interesting. It's important that if you were to have a Zion economy where all the companies or a large number of the companies were cooperatives and employee owned, you would still want free market to function, because you still want to have the discipline of the free market to push the capital towards its most efficient use. And I think that is something that would, and it's interesting, as I said, the Mondragon model is not universally popular among leftists. Another critic of Mondragon is Noam Chomsky, who says, it's all well and good that the employees own their own businesses. I'm okay with that. But look, it still functions in the context of a market economy. They still have to make adjustments and be competitive in a market economy. And so it's still not perfect, because Noam Chomsky is, an old-fashioned communist who still believes in a planned economy. And he, sees that the Mondragon model is not his, communist ideal of a planned economy, which he's, still stuck in the past and still dreams of, and so forth. But you would want to keep the free market amongst competition amongst cooperatives to provide market discipline so that capital is efficiently used, and there is still pressure to produce good products and so forth. And just to layer over your comment earlier about noting that Brigham Young's comments were very much similar reactions to what one sees in things like Marx. In fact, the Communist Manifesto was published in 1848, which was the very same year that those Latter-day Saints who went to Utah were first arriving in Salt Lake. So I mean, it's these modern revelations and this modern commentary from inside the Restoration tradition is very much absolutely in parallel with the rise of the modern industrial economy and its critiques with the rise of socialism and communism. People like John Taylor commented extensively on communism and socialism. They were all very well acquainted with these ideologies.
Hey, Boyd, go ahead.
Hey, James, it was a really good presentation. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Out of curiosity, you live in Utah, right?
Currently, but I've spent most of my life in New York City.
Okay. Back in 2008, they had a Zionic conference in Provo. And they had hundreds of people there from all over the place. And they had presentators from different groups, all over the place. It had all kinds of different ideas of what Zion was like. You wouldn't happen to, were you happen to been there, or?
I would not have been there, but I can tell you that my co-author Warner Woodworth was probably all over that place, all over that conference.
Yeah, I was there at that time, and it was quite interesting to see the many approaches and viewpoints on what Zion is supposed to be like, and it was all over the map. I tell you, it was really interesting. One question of course, this came up several times in that conference, but that when Christ comes on the second return, he's going to have his own system. And just out of curiosity, what would you suppose would happen when Christ comes? What would be the system he was going to establish?
The question, so, during the millennium, in other words,
Yes.
the question is going to be sort of one of economics. What will the economy be like? Will we still have scarcity that we have to allocate? Do we still have to grow food and have factories that build stuff for us during the millennium? Or will Christ bring, technologies and so forth that make it like a Star Trek economy where it's post scarcity? It would all depend on that. And I have no idea. I have no speculation as to what would be the case if that were to happen. So our approach in this book and in our own work is, when Christ comes, what will be will be. What we're doing is trying to figure out how to build Zion before Christ comes. And there's an interesting, there's kind of conflict in the Restoration and in broader Christianity toward this. One group of people look to the second coming and see that, focus on all the catastrophes that are supposed to happen. So they focus on prepping and bunkering down and, preparing to last out all the terrible things that are supposed to happen when the second coming's just about to happen. But there's another philosophy which is I think called postmillenarianism. Anyway, it's not just in the Restoration tradition. It's found in other parts of Christianity, where the idea is that our job is to build a more perfect world in preparation to be able to present it to Christ when he returns. And, our challenge isn't to go run away and hide in the mountains, but our challenge is to build a world that will welcome Christ and that will not certainly be perfect, and it will still need a second coming to sort things out, but one where we can say, look, we've actually done some things. We reduced poverty. We created a more fair economy, and sort of offer that up to the Lord to rule over when He comes, and that's what the purpose of Christianity is to help us, build toward a better world in anticipation of the second coming and of Christ's coming. Because remember, when the second coming happens, we'll still be the same people we are. So if our world is full of vicious, greedy people, then Christ will have to work with vicious, greedy people to build the millennium. But if we can build a world full of charitable, hardworking, faithful people, that'll make building millennium all that much easier for the Savior. That's sort of my personal take on it.
Yeah, that's good. You mentioned also about the conflict between the socialist and the, I guess that we call free enterprise. I guess that would be the term you would use, but I didn't hear you say that one. But when you're dealing with socialism versus the free enterprise system, one thing that could be observed with it is socialists divide the scarcity of goods, and a free enterprise system, you're trying to push the abundance of goods. There's, when you've gotten a socialist system, everyone's trying to get something out of it, but they don't want to put a whole lot of effort in it. Well, there's just not the same motivation there as you would in a free enterprise type system. I think there's flaws in both of them, but that's what I've observed with it anyway.
Oh yeah, no, the approach of socialism is that the pie is fixed and we're just fighting over how big a piece of the pie we get. And the free enterprise system, ideally, is let's bake some more pies.
Yes, that's a good point. Thank you very much, James.
Sure, thank you.
We're approaching 10 o'clock. I don't want to cut things off prematurely, but I do have to make it to Iowa for 10 o'clock tomorrow. So I would anticipate if there are any other questions or comments, this is the time to get them in. Let me get again the comment that James Lucas, I very much appreciate the work that you've done to put together a new edition of this book. I very much appreciate your updating us on the Mondragon exercise. I am so pleased when I can see across the world there are these Zionic enterprises. And yes, we do have wars. We do have conflicts. We do have children dying because of bombs. And yet we have a lot of good Christian activity. And I'm so pleased to have the Catholic illustration brought in here, because for us to recognize that Zion is God's plan, not just the plan for a church. It is a plan for our destiny. And to move toward that, we need to become the people of peace that can be the agents of the Prince of Peace to bring it about. Thank you, James, for your presentation tonight. Anyone else with a comment or question? If not, I'm going to sing a Tahitian hymn, which is called Tiona Nehi Nehi. I would have had my wife sing it, and she would have loved it because it's one of her favorite hymns. And Tiona is the Tahitian word for Zion. Tiona Nehi Nehi, Aya here ia, te veamoa, te ne amahana, Tai moe te tu, haere tau te tiona, e whare re atu iana, o tiona, e te ma te tau. May you be blessed with a touch of the worldwide Tiona. Thank you, James Lucas, for helping us be introduced to that tonight. And may the good spirit go with you. Good night.
And thank you for pressing me to do this presentation.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good week. We'll see you next week.
Good night.